Hello and welcome to the AT Collective. I am super pumped to have Sarah Solomon with me today. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
So, Sarah, I think you are very well known in the AT space, particularly to do with motor neuron disease and your innovative solutions to challenges that come your way. But who would you say that Sarah Solomon is?
Sarah Solomon graduated from Curtin University in Perth in 1995. Sarah Solomon is a country girl by background, which I think probably leads to some of my sort of more innovative things, because I grew up with a mum who had a disability in a country town. And I became an OT sort of almost by accident. Knew I wanted to do something in the medical field, and stumbled maybe across OT, although my mum did have an OT. And it just seemed to me like the sort of perfect merging of being able to assist people in things that were important to them rather than just treating a symptom. And I think even as a younger teenager, it really piqued my interest as something that I wanted to do, having seen the people that had helped my mum over the years. And yeah, so I started uni as a very green country girl, aged 18, moved to the city. Probably wasn't the best student in the world, but I think they saw I had potential. And yes, I've traveled around the world. I've worked in a few different countries and a few different states over the course of my career. Settled in Melbourne in 2001, so I've been here probably the longest that I've ever been anywhere. And I think just of all the things that I've done, all the jobs that I've had in my career, and they've all taught me things that I've taken into other jobs. And I think I would really describe myself as a lifelong learner who just never wanted to be an OT that felt like they were not doing the utmost that they could do for the people that they worked with, wherever it seemed to be.
So where are you working now? You've probably got a few hats.
Yeah, I've actually cut down a few of my hats. So at the moment, I'm the senior clinician OT at Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem in the statewide Progressive Neurological Diseases Service, which is a health-funded level 5 centre of excellence for people with progressive neurological conditions. But it was really sort of started by some neurologists that saw a gap for the management of people with motor neuron disease and Huntington's disease, because even like pre-NDIS, pre all of the sort of services that exist for people now, there was a gap because of the breadth and variety of challenges that these people experience. So I have worked there for almost 15 years, fell into that by accident after having my first daughter. Prior to that, I'd worked mostly in sort of your younger people neuro rehab sort of services. And the other job I have at the moment is I am a guest lecturer / tutor at Australian Catholic University here in Melbourne, presenting the 4th year AET 6-week intensive tutorials that the students have got on their curriculum, which was a development over the last few years with some very passionate ACU tutors. Prior to that, I've also worked as assistive technology consultant for Zytec, which is one of the companies in Australia that is a supplier of electronic assistive technology, especially around the evaluation of alternate access for devices such as eye gaze or head mice or switches or all those kind of things, lots of mounting. So yes, at the moment I only have one job. I also do work in the NDIS service of Bethlehem Hospital, because we have a branch of an NDIS service, because we saw the need for a sort of more specialist service for people with MND, especially because I don't fit into how the NDIS was probably designed, because I have very rapidly progressing functional challenges and also very wide and varied functional challenges. So yeah, a few hats.
So I know that assistive technology is a big part of your passion, but what kind of assistive tech have you worked in and are you most passionate about?
I think I've worked in most areas of assistive technology. I think working with people with motor neuron disease especially, you really see the benefit of assistive technology to compensate for some of the functional challenges that they're having. My sort of special interest at the moment is the implementation, trial, setup of electronic assistive technology, especially around alternate access to AAC devices, computer access, being able to keep people connected, being able to control their environment, their wheelchair, their bed, their chair, whatever they want to do. About 10 years ago, I saw some information that came out of America around the challenges that people with MND have in accessing technology, which we knew even prior to the NDIS, My Aged Care. And I had always worked with Motor Neurone Disease Association, and for most of you, you will know that in the states, or in the different states in Australia, MND Association all have varying degrees of equipment library, and that was developed because even pre-NDIS, things couldn't go fast enough for the challenges that people would have. But along with that, I was seeing how the electronic assistive technology that was crossing over from mainstream into disability was really going to enhance people's life. And so I started working with a couple of the companies, Zytec and Link Assistive, Spectronics, and developed a sort of computer access. We call it the Allied Health Technology Lab at Bethlehem, where we have a range of demonstration equipment for alternate access, for AAC, for mounting, because we knew that even if people didn't need it right at the moment, they were coming into clinic wanting to at least see it. And having to then try and organise a supplier to come in, it was just really hard. So applied for some grants, worked with Fight MND and the MND Association, and we now have a fully functioning technology room set up where we've got everything on demo. So at least we know that people can see it, touch it, feel it, and be able to trial it when they're ready to in their journey, because we know especially people with MND want to access assistive technology on anything at their own pace, because they are facing a huge diagnostic challenge and the associated sort of psychological impact that comes with that. So we just really wanted to have something that was available at the drop of a hat. If they happened to come into clinic and said, my, brother's cousin's uncle was Googling MND and saw that, lots of people with MND have an eye gaze. And so at least we can show it to them so they know it's available when they need it. They can feel it, touch it. And the feedback from that has been really, really positive, and we've continued to develop that room. It's utilised mostly by the OTs and the speech pathologists. And I think in terms of our statewide service, it's been a real asset to the journey for people with MND, because we have immediate access to the tech that they might need.
Yeah, I find that very challenging as a private practice owner, that I don't have it all on tap.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got switches, I've got a variety of things. That's as much as, if I bought lots of eye gaze and other products, it's just cost prohibitive.
I think, one of the things that came out of that is that a number of the other MND clinics across Australia also took on that model and developed similar sort of scenarios. And so it's been quite a privilege to go along that journey. And I took a bit of a leap just seeing the need. And it was really at that point about funding and about availability to people, especially if they were coming from rural and remote areas. That was added another challenge. So the fact is the clinic sees probably 80% of people in Victoria with MND at some point. So when they come down, if they even say it to their neurologist, I'm really worried what happens if I'm going to, not be able to use my hands to control my phone. And the neurologist is like, well, I'll just go down and see the girls in OT, or actually, yes, we are all girls at the moment, or the girls in OT, and they'll be able to show you some options. And at least people can leave knowing that there are solutions or, options for them, even if they don't need it right at that moment. And I think it just takes one level of anxiety out of all the anxiety that people may be, experiencing at that time.
And I know you talked about the physical changes, the psychological changes, the impact of that. But like, I am working with a person at the moment, newly diagnosed, and the amount of phone calls and service providers and people just, coming in on the house all at once. It's like, there's only so much you can take on that journey. And maybe the phone access, just knowing that there is a solution, but not going down that path at that time. I feel that timing's everything.
Yeah. And I think because people with MND especially, we call it dancing. I call it dancing the dance. I see my role as someone who wants to let people know what assistive technology options are available to them. So at least they know if they need it, it's there. We don't have a crystal ball. No one knows how the changes are going to happen. And I often will just say to people, whatever happens, we've got a solution to help you to do the things you want to do, or go the places you want to go, or be comfortable, or do whatever is important to you, because it's not up to me to decide that someone needs an eye gaze system if they're not interested and it's not important to them. And so person A and person B may end up with completely different assistive technology. And I think that is the key to the assistive technology sort of process, is working out what the person wants to do and working back from there. When I was working at Zytec, we sometimes would get referrals in for someone to, trial an eye gaze. And when I got there, they really, hadn't kind of started with the process. They'd started with a potential solution rather than starting with what the person wanted to do, what their best access was. And so I do hope that some of what I give in this podcast is about, it's the journey, not the solution, and that you've always got to keep the person in the center about what is important to them and what they want to do. As OTs, we are all about what people want to do, and that the assistive technology is filling a gap for whatever challenges they're having in their function, to be able to let them do what they want to do, whatever that is.
And I often hear people talk about eye gaze or neuronode and jumping straight to that point, which is so far away from where they are. And it's like, but they want to turn the TV on. Let's just do the TV on and off. Let's just start, build capacity, interact with your environment, instead of going to that point.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, eye gaze or neuronode is just an access method. It's literally like using a mouse or a keyboard. You've got to design the whole system to make sure that it will do what they want to do. I think I often give this analogy that those sort of high level alternate access systems require a lot of training and a lot of evaluation around what is the best combination of hardware, software access related to the person's environment, goals, who's there with them, all of those things. And I always give the analogy, and all of my colleagues laugh at this, that it's about driving a car. You don't get in the car for the first time and get in a Ferrari and drive down the freeway. You get in the bomb, like I did, in the paddock, on the farm, or in the car park, and you don't know where anything is, and you've got to practice and practice and practice. And then you build up to saying, right, now I need this car because, this is where I'm driving. This is who I've got to take with me. I didn't buy a sports car when I had my second kid. I bought a wagon.
So there's a process. There's a process. Yeah. I love your post when you showed the one about the gentleman with flower limb MND wanting to smoke his cigarettes, light the cigarette. Can you just describe that journey and how you created? Well, did you create the solution, or he did?
It was a bit of a joint effort. So interesting enough, I think I'll give a bit of a background on that guy. I met him the first time he came to the MND clinic, and he's happy for me to talk about this. Just everybody, he's totally fine. He was just distraught by the diagnosis and by what this meant for him and his life. He was losing roles left, right, and centre because he had flail upper limb MND. So it meant that his hands were non-functional, but he could walk and talk. But you can imagine the impact that was having on his life. And so once he was onto the NDIS, he asked me to be his NDIS OT. And so the first time we went down to his house, I just sat with him in his kitchen and said, babe, what's annoying you the most about this, disastrous situation? Because I suppose the OT in me was like, oh, we need to look at, turning lights on and off, or, that kind of thing. And he was like, you know what annoys me? He said, I can't light my cigarettes, can't hold my cigarettes. So every time I want to go out for a smoke, I have to ask my brother or my wife or one of my kids. And he really didn't want to ask his kids. And the other thing was that he couldn't, excuse my language, wipe his bottom. And the third thing was that he couldn't scratch his nose or other parts of his anatomy. And I knew at this point that there was a turning point that I could make, or a fork in the road, where I could look down your traditional OT assistive technology that someone might need, or we could go on this journey to just really keep him in the center of the equation. And I think, to me, there was no question where I was going to go. Like, he didn't care about his bed. He didn't care about a recliner. He didn't care about a ramp. He didn't care about any of that stuff. He cared about smoking and not having his wife wipe his bottom and being able to scratch bits of his anatomy. And so the first thing I looked at was a bidet with foot controls. And that for him was just completely the best thing ever. He all of a sudden didn't have to ask anyone. He could walk into the toilet. We put a hook near the nearest toilet so he could kind of pull his shorts down, and he bought a couple of pairs of shorts that are a bit bigger than his normal ones, so they slid down. He had quite good leg control, so he could then squat down to kind of shuffle his trousers up. So the bidet with foot control was number one thing. And
was that an already existing product, or did you have to talk to the bidet people to modify a bidet?
No, it was an existing product. I think a lot of people don't know that some of the bidets from the bidet shop can come with a foot control. It's actually, I think, something that came from us talking about it. The foot control is literally 3 of the boxes with sort of raised bumps on the button that you want to press. So you've got rear, wash, front, wash, and dry. But it meant that he could do that himself. And all of a sudden, he had an epiphany that maybe I wasn't a symbol of loss. I was a symbol of enabling him and ensuring that he didn't feel so disabled by his changing hand function. And it just kind of rolled from there. It also gave him this purpose, because he was like, Sarah, okay, I've got to work out how to smoke. And I was like, okay, well, and he said, I've got a friend who's a Sparky. And I was like, okay, let's do this together. And it just gave him a purpose. And it was amazing. It re-engaged him with his friends. We got the men's shed involved. It just kind of snowballed into this beautiful thing where I provided some of the technology, like the switches and the mounts, and his mate and we worked out that an electric arc lighter could be hacked to be switch adapted. And then we did version 1, which you might have seen the video of. That was 2 separate pieces. So it was the lighter and then the holder. And then we kind of worked out from that we needed a revision, because he had quite a big beard and he couldn't see when his ciggy was going to the end. So we got a microphone stand and hacked that together and put some more mounts on it. So he had a mount for his ciggy holder, he had a mount for the ashtray, and he had a mount for his beer. And we got a rear vision mirror off an old car and put that on there so he could look in the mirror to see when his ciggy was going low. And he used that for 2 years. But the interesting thing that came out of that is, after people saw it, and he gave me permission to post it, is that people started asking about it. So I could tell him that he was creating, a conversation within the OT world. This model has been sort of shown at various university lectures around ethics and around choice and around dignity of risk. And I was telling him how he was inspiring an entirely new generation of OTs to be creative and keep the person in the center. And the difference in his attitude to life, despite this, the changes that were happening to him, was amazing. Next minute, he's like, okay, now I'm going to design this. Now I'm going to design this. You can see that he bought those shoes on the Amazon website. And then I was on AT Fridays with him and he loved that. And so I really felt like we just went around this AT journey that kept him in the center. But the benefit was so much more than him just being able to do things himself. It was him feeling good about himself again, him being able to be, engaged with his kids, his friends, knowing that he was changing, therapists' perceptions of how things could do, and giving inspiration to think outside the box. And so it just went on. And it was such a beautiful journey to be part of. Like, I feel so privileged. And he loved doing that stuff with me, loved it. Because he was a tradie by background, you see, and he was losing his ability to work. So then this kind of created a different role in his life that I don't think he or I expected would happen.
So a little bit more inspiring than a mobile shower commode.
Oh yeah, he was, the shower commode was not important.
That's so good. So why do you do what you do? It sounds like you're very inspired by the people, but is that why you get up each
What?
morning?
Do you know, I I don't even know. Look, I think having a parent that had a disability and then looking after her and seeing some of the feedback that I get from my clients is really about why I get up. Like, I literally love my job. Yes, do I get frustrated with the funding sources that we work? Yes. But the things that we're able to do to help people retain some dignity, some quality of life, some purpose, some goals and roles, I think is like no other profession ever. And the fact that we can do whatever is important to that person seems to me it's so important in people's lives. So important. And I always, when I do, talks to students or I have, grade ones that start or juniors that start, it's always about keeping the person in the middle and that there is no clinical pathway that any of us can follow. And it's about good communication and about giving people choices and about enabling trials and facilitating their ability to make a choice with you. I don't feel like I actually never use the word prescription. Like I never prescribe equipment. To me, prescription is something that someone tells you you need. Like a doctor prescribing a medication. I will always talk about a process of evaluation and that it's a circular process. It's never ending. It's a what do you want to do? What features do you need? Talking about feature matching AT. And this is what I've been talking a lot about to my students is that there is no answer often. There is a compromise. There is the first thing you need to do is work out what they want to do and work out the features of the AT they need and then go from there because other features might become more important and other features may become less important as the trial is in their environment or wherever they're going to be. And it's about a process. It's about a partnership, not about me telling someone what they need. I will never, ever, ever just go, you have to have this. That's not my role. I will talk about pros and cons and benefits and limitations and risks and choices. And we go from there.
Because that should decrease the risk of abandonment when you're actually doing
100%.
Exactly what they want.
100%.
And I feel sometimes on the Facebook group, we'll see posts like, I need a power, like a small mobility scooter to go into the back of a hatchback, but I need it to have incredible suspension to take someone who's 160 kilos on this kind of, 20-kilometer route each day. And it's like, there is no one product that can do all those things you've asked for. So then you have to manage those expectations. Like you said, the feature matching, you can't do it all in one product.
Yeah. And I'm really honest with my patients sometimes, or my clients or participants or whatever anyone wants to call them. I'm an old school health OT. I still call people patients, which is probably not appropriate for many of the things that I do these days. Yeah, correct. And sometimes it's about compromise. And sometimes it's about changing or giving people different options and having some work out about what is the most important feature, like what is the most important thing that you need. When I work with assistive, like the electronic assistive technology space, if someone comes in for an evaluation, the first thing I'll say is, what are the top 3 things that you want this device to do? What are the top 3 things, like the most important things? Because often like something may be able to do lots of things, but not everything can do everything like you mean. And so it's about working out what is your top priority and then saying, well, if we choose this one, this is the pros and cons and benefits and limitation of this system with this access method. And the consequence of choosing this, style of something or this product is X, Y, and Z, and just keeping the dialogue open. I do think that if you start to promise a unicorn piece of equipment, it does get tricky. So it's important to be really honest. It's important to let people trial things because I think sometimes what people might have in their head, if it doesn't exist, you've got to provide the options and provide the trials, and then people will start to work out what's the most important thing for them.
Yeah. So having them at the center of everything.
Always. Always. It's not my decision.
Mm-hmm. Are there any times when things don't go to plan, and how do you overcome challenges?
So many times. Look, I think challenges are something, and that's why I talk about AT evaluation being a process. It's about working out what they need, trialing some products, having another trial, going back to the drawing board. But, sometimes we don't always get it right. And I certainly work in a space where people's function is always changing. And so there is often times where we have to make a quick U-turn for whatever reason. And I would never call that a fail, but I think when you're choosing AT, especially working with people with unusual functional challenges or changing functional ability, that the AT that you choose hopefully will have some embedded options to adjust things. And I think equipment suppliers are certainly developing stuff better now than they used to 20 years ago. The ability to change the height of a commode without needing to buy an entirely new commode, which for many years was the reality, or, adjust the tension on a backrest, or add a headrest, or add a lateral, or change the foot plates, or, those kind of things. And I think some of the good clinical reasoning is around being really honest with your participants that if we choose X model or Y model, these are the benefits and limitations. This one will adjust and this one won't. And having some compromise in there. But, occasionally we all get it wrong. But I think as long as the process has been robust and comprehensive, then it is less likely to not be compatible with what the person needs in the end. And I think that's where, in especially the NDIS space, that good documentation, good evidence of trials, good evidence of all that stuff, all the conversations, all the things that you do to go along the journey with someone means that it is less likely to fail and less likely to be abandoned. I think the NDIS has a habit of trying to make therapists to rush to make a decision. And I think that is often where difficulties happen, and I will dig my heels in.
But I think, for example, when I have bought a mattress for our bed, you spend thousands of dollars on a beautiful mattress, you try it in the store, you do the best you can at the time. You might have laid on it for 10, 15, 20 minutes in store and go, yeah, this is the best one in the store. When you get it home, it's not the same as that, or it's been a lag of 6 months or whatever it is. And then you get it, it's like, oh, that's not quite what I remember. I find mattresses very difficult because what you try in store is not going to be the same as what you get in your house, because it's been laid on by, 100 people before it gets to you. So some things can't be perfect because you cannot simulate exactly the same unless you go, I'll buy the one from the store, which is not really that appropriate either.
And I think at that point, I will try and really bed down what the person feels isn't right about the bit of AT, because I think jumping to another solution, or a new mattress can be really tricky. And certainly in my particular sphere, there is impact on the use of AT for other reasons, whether it be psychological challenges, pain and discomfort. And I think mattresses are probably one of the trickiest things to be able to trial and get right, because you're right, it's like you try on a pair of shoes in a shop and they've been tried on by 67 other people, and then you get your new ones and they feel stiff and they've got to wear in. But I will always come back to exactly what is it that isn't feeling right for you, not just trying to get the next thing.
And so in chatting with you about how to make larger changes than just for your one person who's in front of you, can you give us an example? Particularly, I'm thinking of the power lift chairs and I'd love to hear this story.
Oh, well, I'm not going to name any names at this point because it's still work in progress, but I have been lamenting the fact for many years that electric lift recliner chairs are very, very hard to have any sort of alternate access to them. If you can't press the buttons, very few. And I've hacked up a few solutions in the past. Anyway, I've kind of been banging on about this for years. And I had the opportunity actually yesterday to meet with the CEO of one of the big chair suppliers in Victoria, who actually supplies around Australia. And me and my team had the opportunity to show him some of our hacked up solutions that we'd done in the past. And as every engineer does, including my darling husband, he was overthinking it. And I was like, no, just come back. But the good thing about having our tech lab is that I was able to pull out my box of switches and pull out my box of things. Anyway, we ended up having this like amazing thing where he ended up saying to me, so you just want something that you could plug a switch into to mimic a function of the chair controller? Yes, that's exactly what I want. And I went through the whole, like, how you choose a switch and how you position a switch and how you mount a switch. And I said, I don't need you to provide the switches. They don't need to be embedded into the armrests, because what if someone doesn't have any arms or has no hand function? And he said, it's never occurred to me. And but he was like, oh, you could do that. So we could just have a box like attached to the side of the chair where you could just plug in whatever switch you want for each function. I was like, yes. It was like the clouds parted and the sun shone through. And the supplier who was with him rang me on the way home and he said, Sarah, it just never even occurred to me that would be something that was useful. He said, I know I've heard you talk about it, but I never kind of understood it. And so hopefully in the near future, there will be the ability for chairs to have either a retrofitted, like this one particular brand of chairs, but hopefully other suppliers will take, to be able to retrofit a switch. Doesn't matter if it's a buddy button, a specs, a microlight, a chin switch, a puff and blow, whatever, because they all have the same jack. They all have 3.5 mil mono jacks, and I just needed a box that we could plug. So you've got, head up or, backrest up, backrest down, stand up, whatever the functions are. So that was very exciting. And I left he left and he was talking to me out in the lift and he said, guys are pretty innovative. He goes, in all my years, I've never thought about it. So there you go. So hopefully that will be on the market soon, because I showed him some of the posts in the NDIS OT Facebook groups about people wanting alternate, the ability to use the functions in an electric lift recliner chair if someone couldn't press the buttons. And, people come up with their own hack solutions hacked together for whatever reason. But
and that's amazing. But I love the message of, some stars aligned that led you to actually being able to talk to the CEO in that situation. Is there any other magical unicorn AT that you're hoping will exist in the future that might get people thinking about it? Or is there anything else we can do, going back to manufacturers finding those gaps and going, what else could be done?
Yeah, look, I think in general manufacturers have got on board with the ability of having inbuilt adjustments, and I think that is one of the really important things. I do hope the suppliers also continue to facilitate good trials, because I think that is 100% part of the process, and that any good AT evaluation includes the therapist, the participant, and whatever supplier is, got in stock the bit of AT with the features that you've identified with your participant that is important. I think that, yes, that really coming back to what some of the gaps are in the AT world are around that flexibility for inbuilt adjustments, being able to add things, take away things, because so many people, we're not static beings. No one is a static being. But I do think suppliers and developers are doing better in that space at the moment. That's certainly like something I've seen a lot of growth in the last sort of 10 years.
So do you have any role models or people you look to get inspiration from?
I've had lots of role models. Lots. I mean, so many people that I come into contact with every day. A lot of my patients, I think, are really inspirational. There's a therapist in America called Sarah Feldman, who was the inspiration behind the tech room development. She works at an M&D clinic there. I've had lots of senior clinicians and lots of managers that have just really inspired me every day. I don't think I have anyone particular. I mean, I'm inspired by all of the people that I work with. I think there is such a breadth of knowledge throughout our community. And I think it's so inspiring that so many people are willing to share. And like you, starting these kind of podcasts, like amazing. So, yeah, I don't think I've got anyone particularly. I think my mum randomly was a bit of an inspiration. She never kind of let things get in her way. My mum's friends who enabled her to do the things we want to do. You know, the builder that built our house in 1978, who put in the worst level access shower known to man, after my parents fought him for quite a long while that my mum couldn't step into a 1978, stepping shower.
Yeah.
And that to the moment that she passed away, that shower just, we had towels on the floor because they didn't understand a gradient at that point.
What about if you, I mean, I know you're working at the university, so you'd see
Mm.
that from that side of things, and you're working with newer therapists to the area. What kind of advice do you give to people, or if someone comes to you and says, where do I learn? How do I learn? Where do I go next to get better at my scope of practice in working with assistive tech?
Look, I think there's so many places you can get it now. So actually had this conversation with some of the students yesterday because we were doing some sort of home mods, just an intro to home mods. And so I gave them, information on things like the Elizabeth Ainsworth company with Cardiolab, their Rails project for Verve OT, the home mods, your, AT stuff. I think I do encourage them to join some of the Facebook groups because despite them being young and, like my children tell me that Facebook is an old person thing, but I think there is a huge amount of information out there. Join OT Australia, get involved with the RATA. Like there is so much information out there for people to be able to access sort of training, learning, facilitating, get a good make sure wherever you're working to have a good supervisor that is around and available and able to talk things through to you. Ask in your interviews, what sort of training do I get? What sort of training budget do I have? And try and choose an employer that supports that process of lifelong learning.
That sounds like a really good place to start. However, it also sounds overwhelming when you put it like that, because there is so much out there.
So much out there.
And I think that's where a good supervisor will come along, someone who's got all that to learn and go, well, let's break it down.
Yeah. And I think that's certainly something that I said to the students the other day, my first job was in a forensic psychiatry hospital. Like, how different can that be? And, to not also rush in to try and be a specialist in something, just to keep keep within the scope of your practice within where you are in your learning journey. I probably wouldn't do a home mod these days. It's just not something that I'm familiar with anymore. I don't think I'd be the right person for someone who needed a complex home mod. I've not done that kind of stuff. But if you want to control something with your eyes, I'm your girl. And I think keeping that in the bottom of your heart, that if it was your mum or your dad or your nan or your friends, whatever it is, like what would you want them to, what sort of service would you want them to have? And it's okay to say, I don't know. Don't fake it till you make it. That's where stuff goes a bit wrong.
It's like my first job was on an ortho ward, and I got really good at shower stools.
Over toilet frame. Yeah.
And I got really good. I
pick
got
up
bored,
sticks.
But it was...
I did.
Yes.
My second job in an ortho ward with basically people who had total hip replacements or total knee replacements. But tell you, it honed some skills that I still use to this day.
And the medic being around the other professionals, learning how they work and what they do. Like there's so much more you take away. It's not just about the raised toilets.
I actually had to explain, one of my grade ones the other day, someone had come into our ward in the palliative stream who'd had a dynamic hip screw. She was like, what's a dynamic hip screw? And I said, well, if someone needs something done to their hip, if they've broken it, there's three things that can happen. There's a total hip replacement, a hemiarthroplasty, a dynamic hip screw. And this was the information that I'd used from like 25 years ago.
Nailed it.
Yeah. And each thing has its own limitations, and you'll need different assistive technology because of these limitations or these, contraindications. So
well
I think,
done.
I know, right? Pulled that out of some sort of long lost memory.
Do you have any favorite quotes that you go by or anything that inspires you?
I do. I think this is something probably really particular that struck. I read it and I was like, that's exactly what I think my role is here in the M&D clinic. And it is that medicine adds life. I would get this around the wrong way. Medicine adds days to life, but OT adds life to days.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that I choose to live by.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Is there anything else you would like to let us know about Sarah and what she does and how people can get in touch with you? I know you're very busy, probably don't have a whole lot of time for everyone getting in touch. But
yeah. So, I mean, I think that you can probably find me on the Facebook groups. I do work in Melbourne at the statewide Prog Neuro Clinic that you could look up. I do offer some external supervision through that, particularly around people with motor neurone disease, not just sort of general AT. But really, I think I'm a pretty approachable kind of person. I have, people that message me on Facebook just asking for advice on stuff, and I'm more than happy to respond.
You've got your own Facebook group. That's your.
I do also convene a Facebook group that is occupational therapists working in Australia, assisting people living with motor neurone disease. And that group was specifically set up from a group of OTs in Melbourne and Queensland, where we saw that there maybe needed a space for that sort of really particular clinical reasoning around the needs of people with MND. So yes, I do that, but I'm pretty old school these days. I'll just help whoever needs a little bit of help, encourage whoever needs a little bit of encouragement.
Brilliant. Thank you for inspiring a new generation of OTs and for inspiring old generation of OTs to say, challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
What aren't we doing? What are the gaps? And don't just think about the mobile shower commode. What is actually important to the person, and keeping the person at the forefront the whole time.
And involving them in the process. So yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks
for
amazing.
Coming onto the podcast.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love your podcast. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks.
Bye.